Iran factor in Syria, and also in the wider region. With us to talk about it is the Iranian dissident Ramin Parham, co-author in French. Anytime soon a translation?
I will tell you.
You'll tell me. Okay. The Secret History of the Iranian Revolution. Haitham Mana, the Syrian Opposition's National Coordination Committee for Democratic Change. Welcome back. Welcome back from Tel Aviv, Israeli-Iranian academic Maher Javandafar. And from Washington, Robert Zarate of the conservative Foreign Policy Initiative think tank. Welcome back to all of you. We're waiting, by the way, for remarks from Kofi Annan, just back from his tour of Iran, Syria and Iraq. He should be speaking anytime soon. We'll go to Geneva when that happens. We were talking before the break about the impact of the Revolutionary Guards. Back in May, the deputy head of the Quds Force, the one that's tasked with overseas operations, had said that yes, they do have forces that are present inside of Syria. That surprised you, Maher Javandafar, I remember, when they announced it publicly. Why is that?
Till then, Francois, the Iranian government was very coy about its involvement in Syria in terms of its military support. Since they just said usually that we provide, yes, we back President Assad, but they usually talked about economic or moral backing. They were really shy about it. They really never actually said anything about military support. And in fact, there was, I think 2 months before that, an article in the Wall Street Journal which talked about Iranian military support to Syria, and the Iranians denied it. But when it was surprising when in May, not only a military official, but the deputy head of the IRGC Quds Force, which is the special forces foreign operations of the Revolutionary Guard, saying yes, we are actually operating in Syria. So for them to come out, it was like that. It was very, very unusual for the Iranians to do it. But I think that there are reasons. I think the Iranian government was sending a message to the Saudis, especially, and to the United States, that if you are thinking about doing what you did in NATO to Syria, forget about it, because we are there and we are going to support President Assad.
By the way, it's not just the Revolutionary Guards that are in Syria. Saudi Arabia and Qatar we've been arming the Syrian insurgents, this with the tacit blessing of Washington, which has CIA and special forces in neighboring Jordan and Turkey trying to keep an eye on who gets those weapons. When you look at the situation with both sides more and more armed, and with the killing increasing, Robert Zarate, is it not alarming? Is sending weapons the right idea?
Well, there are a couple things. First, interestingly, some of the Syrian opposition have been getting their light arms from the actual Syrian military itself. As people do well know, the Syrian military is a very corrupt institution. Although on paper it has 300,000 troops, the majority of them are Sunni, and they're not being used in arms, suppressing the armed movements. But that said, the extent to which the Saudis have provided arms, again, it's been mainly Saudi entities, not the Saudi government per se, and also at the level of light arms. What we haven't seen in Syria yet are the introduction of things such as heavy anti-tank weapons and surface-to-air missiles. These, to the extent they're in very small numbers, and that's a sort of support that reportedly the Saudi government is trying to push forward, and that the Turkish government would conceivably assent to. However, a stumbling block to the sort of heavier arms entering into Syria has been the Obama administration itself. It has sort of tried to toe a line, on the one hand, trying to support, certainly rhetorically, the various Syrian opposition groups, but at the same time trying to limit the extent to which the struggle has been militarized. So on a certain level, I think the United States certainly needs to make a decision. The Obama administration needs to make a decision. In August 2011, President Obama said that Assad must go. However, subsequently, the policy of the administration have been at best half-hearted. And I think it's time for the United States in particular to lead a coalition of nations, responsible nations, in the first to help establish safe zones within Syria, or in neighboring countries. Turkey certainly, it appears, would be willing to do this. If not, but however, the Obama administration itself hasn't shown itself willing to go that far yet.
Robert Zarate, when you see that sending weapons into Afghanistan in the 1980s is still haunting that country, when you see that sending weapons into Iraq is doing untold damage to this very day, again, is sending more weapons the right idea?
I agree that sending weapons willy-nilly is not the right idea. To the extent that there is any sort of what's called indirect intervention through the supply of arms, it needs to be carefully managed. And that's why our organization, the Foreign Policy Initiative, has basically argued you can't just simply send arms and hope the thing resolves itself. What actually needs to happen is leadership from the United States in particular and other responsible nations to work hand in hand with Turkey, which, by the way, in recent weeks has been the victim of provocations from the Syrian military, and to actually begin helping much more directly the Syrian armed opposition. Just one thing that they could do to help figure out the proper logistical lines, who should be receiving any sort of more serious levels of assistance. The United States could be leading an effort to provide field hospitals to armed opposition groups. This is a fairly benign thing to do. The armed opposition is suffering a lot of a high-level mortality due to comparatively minor injuries, which could have been dealt with had they had better field hospital equipment. So what worries me is that in Washington, there isn't really a strategy. What there is a lot of politicians who are looking at the election clock and waiting until the November elections before they actually start making real policy.
All right.
And I think the tragedy of all this is that Syrians will continue to die.
Haitham Mana.
Exactly. There isn't an American strategy before the American elections, and we will pay the price of that.
And should that strategy be the one that Robert Zarate mentioned?
I don't know if it will be
should there be a
built
concerted
after.
effort to arm?
Now all our problem, that all kinds, and the list of them, which help military, which give military aid to Syrian government is Iranian, because the most important is the Russian one. But the danger of the Iranian aid is with the economical one, because they help the regime with with many billions, more than 12 billions we think that the regime received for salaries, for administration, and for supporting the administration, the direct administration of the regime. And this is for us a very dangerous thing, more than the military one, because Russia gave the regime the capacity of technical apparatus, which received these 3 last months, and up to date they don't stop any military help. For that, I think that we must speak with Russian about this more than with Iranian. But in economical help, it is the question of Tehran.
Squarely the question of Iran.
Yes.
Ramin Param, earlier you were mentioning the 2009 uprising in Iran. We've at numerous occasions on this very set talked about Iran's come up in the discussion when we've talked about the situation not just in Syria but in the wider region. We've seen the star power of Tehran wax and wane. This situation in Syria, Iran cares, it seems, about public opinion. They have a television station that broadcasts in Arabic. They care about the Arab world in terms of how they're seen. Iran's strategy at this point, when it comes to public opinion in the Arab world, what is it?
Well, they have been investing for the past 30 years and far more actively for the past 20 years, right after the end of the war with Iraq. They have been investing heavily in the Hezbollah in Lebanon and in Syria. I mean, this is no secret for anyone. They have also been investing in the Islamic Jihad and those
Hezbollah, which, by the way, has gone quiet when it comes to Syria.
Yes, because they feel the heat. If the Bashar regime falls, I mean, we are talking about the logistic routes to supply arms to Hezbollah, and Hezbollah will have a very, very difficult time Hezbollah will have a difficult time internally to justify itself internally within Lebanon, and will have a very difficult time strengthening its position and keeping its logistic routes open. So they have had a low profile in this story, and let me tell you that. So the Iranians made the Islamic regime, I should say, the Shia regime. They have made a heavy investment in the region, and we were discussing the 2009 Green Revolution in Iran, and we experienced the exact same lack of resolve from the Obama administration in 2009. I mean, we just had very shy, very slight lip support from President Obama to that great democratic movement in Iran. And Mr. Karoubi, Mr. Mousavi are still in jail. Nobody knows where they are. There are hundreds of political prisoners in Iran, and inviting Iran to the table to resolve the Syrian crisis is just giving them another international arena.
But isn't it extending the hand to Iran that made it weak in 2009?
That failed. I mean, the Obama administration came around with an extended hand, with the open fist, remember, advised to President Obama's administration by Ray Takeyh from the Council on Foreign Relations and Vali Nasr. And that policy of open fist miserably failed.
Let me bring in Meyer Javandafar on this. Do you agree?
Well, depends what your definition of failure is. I think Obama's outreach to Iran was, in fact, I have to say, it was a great success, because it basically took away Iran's justification, something which the Iranian regime spent millions of dollars in trying to portray as America as the party that wants to overthrow the regime, as the party who is not interested in dialogue. And basically, this is one of the reasons why the regime is seen much more infighting amongst its ranks after President Obama's outreach, because he showed not just the people of Iran, but he showed also the politicians within Iran that Ayatollah Khamenei's strategy is not the right one. There is another way. There is an alternative way. You can keep your regime, but we want you to join the international community if you just show a little bit of flexibility. Obama showed that there is a door. President Bush said there is no door. And this really actually strengthened not only moderates within the people of Iran, but moderates within the regime, the Iranian regime. There are people even today who believe that there is a better way than the current way which Ayatollah Khamenei is continuing.
We were mentioning a moment ago the situation in Lebanon, and we've seen the spillover effect for the situation in Syria. 3 people killed on Tuesday when Syrian mortars hit villages in northern Lebanon. When you hear about the situation, when you see everyone treading cautiously inside neighboring Lebanon, Robert Zarate, again, it seems to be turning into a nightmare scenario with hardliners in northern Lebanon on both sides, echoing the growing tension inside Syria.
Well, I think part of the reason why the Assad regime military has launched attacks into Lebanon has been because members of the opposition groups have fled across the border. And what we've seen with the Assad regime military is its tactics have been to essentially from afar use artillery indiscriminately, killing whoever it may, and then subsequently sending in if you will, shock troops or shabiha thugs to mop up. And so I'm not surprised, given the way the Assad regime has been handling things internally, that it's being this sloppy and disregarding Lebanon's sovereignty by doing this. And I think this points to the larger issue that I don't know why I'm still shocked that almost a year and a half after these peaceful protests began, and may I add too, these peaceful protests the situation only became violent because the Assad regime started on the offensive. The fact that former Secretary General Kofi Annan or others actually think that the Assad regime will at any point relent, I think is very wishful thinking, and it's not dealing with the reality on the ground, in which now upwards of 16,000 Syrians have died.
The Haitham Mana, this again, we mentioned the star power of Iran in all of this. what will be the future relationship, do you think, between Iran and Syria and Lebanon?
I think that if the situation in Syria change, it will change in all the region, not only in Syria. And Iran will be touched directly by the situation in Syria.
Hence the hardline stance by Tehran?
Iran and Riyadh. I think that the situation in Syria now, all these countries try to concentrate the conflict inside Syria because they are afraid of the epidemic of the revolution.
All right, seen from Tel Aviv, Meir Javanefar, do you agree?
No.
Meir Javanefar, do you agree?
I'm sorry, I
All
can't
right, we're
hear.
having technical problems, it seems, with Tel Aviv. We'll try to
Okay.
fix that in a jiffy.
I got it.
By the way,
Sorry, Francois, I got it. I got it.
you got the question.
I got it. It's okay. I believe so. You said about Iran and Iran is involved. Sorry,
Well,
can you repeat
Haitham
that again?
Manar made the point that if the regime changes in Damascus, it will change things both in Tehran and in Riyadh.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think both. I think it would be to the benefit of Riyadh and it would be to the loss of Iran. But just an important point, Francois, when you were reading the news, you were talking about the Srebrenica massacre. I think this is a very unfortunate disaster that happened in Europe, but I think the timing of it today should remind us that unless we tell Tehran and Riyadh that they should watch over their rebels in Syria, we could see more Srebrenica-like massacres in Syria, and that would be a disaster for the rest of the Middle East.
At this point, what do you think will be the game changer, Meir?
I think at this point, both sides are going to dig their heels in. I think I don't see a breakthrough for now, Francois. I think the only game changer possibly is if Putin completely leaves Assad's side and gives him a deadline. That would be the only game changer at this time. Ayatollah Khamenei is not going to do it at the moment. He will if he sees Assad is on his way out and there's no way of saving him, but it's unlikely to do it now. The man to watch right now is President Vladimir Putin.
All right, Meir Javanefar priming the pump for a debate on Russia. Thanks for that. And that's where we'll leave it for now. I want to thank you for joining us from Tel Aviv. I want to thank as well Robert Zarate for being with us from Washington and here in the studio in Paris. Haitham Manar and Ramin Param. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Stay with us. Coming up next, it's business. And Matthew Warren will have all the day's news.